coming into the US. So certainly there is some predictability on that front, but how does the ongoing friction between the US and China spill over into Europe right now? And what is your take on the very strict export curbs that China just unveiled?
I mean, indeed, the most visible impact is that you have a reorientation of Chinese exports to Europe and also to the rest of the world. And they're actually growing fast, despite going down in the US.
Is there pressure by the Trump administration to have Europe mimic what the US is doing?
I probably wouldn't do that. I don't think we've seen anything extremely explicit or organized, but that's probably a question going forward. I mean, is the US administration going to put consistent pressure on Europe to sort of choose a camp, which of course would put us in a very difficult situation. That's probably above my pay grade. I'm only a central banker, but that's something, of course, that we would be monitoring because it would have current implications. But today, the challenge, to some extent, is indeed this growth of Chinese exports in Europe that might have an impact on prices, but also more broadly speaking, is it sustainable? I mean, is it sustainable that China keeps growing at those rates? It's big. China is big. So at some point, I mean, we've seen in the US now, there is a consensus between Republicans and Democrats that they want to put some barriers to Chinese imports. You know, I would not exclude that we have those discussions at some point in Europe. I mean, we are very much open to trade, but if at some point you have the discussion in the US, we see high penetration of Chinese imports in Europe, and that would lead to job destructions, I cannot exclude that the narrative, the political narrative would change, at least in some countries, and then maybe in Europe.
We have just run very close to home for you, which is in Belgium, which is the home to the hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian assets that is at the heart of discussions for how do you mobilize them? Can you mobilize them? What is the risk that Russia comes after those assets? What's the risk to Belgium? What's the risk to the European Union if they do that? As an economist in Belgium, what is the financial risk to the country in real terms? And what safeguards can you put in place if that were to happen?
I think the short part of the story is that you cannot put, in this case, Europe here at risk. I mean, they don't have the balance sheet to pay back 150 billion to Russia if there is no form of precaution being taken on that front. I think the seizure of the asset as such would have repercussions, and we need to be very cautious on that. What we've been doing is using the proceeds of the interest on the assets in one way or another, using those proceeds in a way that allows for mobilizing more resources for Ukraine without seizing the assets. I think that would be the first best from my perspective.
We appreciate your time.